Black students need to understand their history.
Mm.
And the reason I say that is because you can't even understand sociology without understanding history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of times, I was guilty of this as a student. I see it repeated in generations of students. We think what we're experiencing is new, or we think it is exactly what happened in the past, right? And neither one of those is true, right? Like what happened in the past happened, but it's now adapting to the current context, right?
Right.
So we have to both understand what it meant in the past. We have to understand why people did it in the past, but we also have to understand what has shifted in the context. So that's giving it meaning now.
Yo, what's good, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of Truth to Power. Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to give y'all a brief rundown of what we'll be talking about, as well as who our guest is today. So, without any further ado, today's guest is Dr. Stephanie Sears. She is the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at the University of San Francisco. But I first met her as the co-director of my living learning community that I was a part of my first year. So this living learning community was all centered around the Black identity. It took 30 first and second year students who are Black identified from all different places across the country together to learn about Blackness, together. And Dr. Sears was the facilitator and director of this experience. Back then, Dr. Sears was a professor of sociology at our university, and sociology is the study of social life, social change, and the social causes and consequences of human behavior. So you start to see how that can connect to these overarching themes about racial creation, what it means to be Black, what is Blackness, as they come up in our conversation later on. And yeah, she is by far my favorite professor that I've had since I've been in college. So yeah, I really just hope that y'all stick around and come speak some truth to power. Welcome back to another episode of Truth to Power. Today we have an extraordinary guest. I'm joined by Dr. Stephanie Sears. Dr. Sears, would you like to say anything to the people?
Hello, everyone. So happy to be here. Thanks, Justin, for inviting me.
I'm so grateful to have you on, Dr. Sears. Dr. Sears is a true wealth of knowledge. She is a cultivator of community. Her official role here at the university, you are the Associate Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences?
Yes, specifically of social sciences and interdisciplinary studies. So,
Okay.
yes.
So she has a lot of different jobs on campus. She is very well known, really a connector of spaces, really a great person. I'm so glad to have her on this episode. Today, we'll be talking about a few things ranging from the living learning community experience. I'm so grateful to have, you taught us through that and just gave us such a great educational experience. So I'm glad to have you on here to kind of talk about that. And also just more your educational background, as well as some more, I feel like it's instrumental knowledge that young college-age Black folk who may not be in college right now may, gain some value from. So I just want to have you on the platform to share your wisdom, and make the community a little bit more enlightened from having you on.
Oh, thank you, Justin.
But yeah, so we can kind of just jump right into it, and I want to know more so about your background. And I kind of know a little bit about it. I had you in some classes, but for the people, can you tell us just about your background, kind of more so around the educational route and how you ended up, over here in San Francisco?
Yeah, so a bit of an unlikely path, I think. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana. And
Midwest.
What? And then lived in Bloomington, Indiana with my grandmother. So I grew up in a college town, but I was a townie. So we didn't really interact with the university. But when it was time to go to college, I applied to IU, Northwestern, Purdue. And then my grandmother insisted that I apply to Stanford. I had never heard of Stanford, did not know anything about Stanford. And this was before internet, y'all. So you couldn't go online and look at no pictures. There was a book you had to have or request information. And I didn't really want to go. I wanted to go to IU. I was a little small town kid. It was already a big deal for me to go to college at all. And so that felt like a big stretch. But my grandmother really pushed, really encouraged me. So I sent the application in and didn't think anything else about it. And then one day I came home and back then you got envelopes and it was a big one.
Okay.
And my grandma was like, open it. And I opened it. She said, we got in. So I've always felt that my educational journey wasn't just for me, it was collective. And then from there, I graduated from Stanford with a BA in psychology. I didn't really know what I had no idea, what I wanted to do really. So I worked as a children's librarian, which I loved. And then I started working at Galileo High School. And it was at Galileo High School that I realized I actually like teaching. But I don't want to teach people that get, the law gets involved when they don't show up to class.
Right.
Where do you do that? And someone said, well, you got to get a PhD. And I was like, dang, PhD just to teach at college? Okay, let me figure this out. So I got a master's at San Francisco State in ethnic studies because as someone from Indiana, I grew up, you were black or white. And even if you weren't, people said, you're black and what, right? You're either you were white or non-white. Let's just put it that way, right? And so I was teaching students who were immigrant students from China, from Latin American countries, Central American countries, and I didn't have a lot of knowledge about where my students were coming from, their experience. So I got the master's in ethnic studies and then applied for the PhD program in African American studies and sociology at Yale, and I got in. It was a big surprise and completed that, and now I'm here. That's my journey.
Dr. Sears, I don't know. Like I personally, haven't met a lot of people who are like in the higher education space. Like, you got your people in your family, but like when you hear about these schools like Yale and Stanford, like I don't really think of a lot of people who personally come to mind who I know. And then on top of that, Black women who I know. So Dr. Sears, I'm just so grateful that we have you on, the other end of all that education that you can, pour into us and, keep providing us with that deep wealth of knowledge that you have. So all the way from Indiana, I'm glad.
Indiana girl, right?
I'm glad that you somehow made it here to be our, one of our professors and one of the people who guide our, college journeys. I really am appreciative of that.
Thank you. And just can I add one more thing? I didn't know about Stanford and didn't know if I would get in, and I did. So I just want to encourage everyone, please dream wildly. Just think outside your box. Have a dream school. It may work out, it may not, but you'll never know unless you try.
Right.
So don't tell yourself no. Let somebody else tell you no. Because if I had listened to myself, this would not have been my journey. So just, I always tell people that.
Yeah. That's some good wisdom because Dr. Sears, I came to USF sight unseen. Never been to San Francisco before. Big leap. So I definitely know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Moving along, just kind of talking about your educational and life experiences. I know we kind of touched on this talking about how, you came from Indiana, didn't really see as much diversity. And then, you got out to San Francisco and saw a lot more of it. But how did, just growing up in not only Indiana, but then coming out to a place that's so different, like the Bay Area, how has that really shaped your worldview? What are some of those critical moments that you look back on and think that really shaped me for the long term?
I think the first thing to know about me is that I loved reading. And this is going to connect in a minute. But it was my way of...
Oh, I got you.
Thank you. It was my escape. It was sort of everything to me. It was to read a book about all these different worlds and different people and different places, right? So that just fed me as a kid. I grew up as an only. I'm not anymore, but that was sort of my space, right? Okay. So for me, when I came here, it was almost like I was being a character in a book, right? Here I was, this little girl from Indiana. I didn't even know what a pomegranate was. I didn't even know what a bagel was. I didn't know what an avocado was, right? And I rolled up at Stanford, and people were and I was like, what is that, right?
Yeah, avocado on toast.
I'm just saying, right? So for me, it was really living the adventure that I read about, and that I know sometimes we don't always have real life role models, but I found role models in fictional characters in books and real life people in books that helped me sort of imagine myself in spaces and places that weren't in my reality. So I think one of the things that really stood out to me was just maintaining my curiosity and not feeling shame, right? That I can't be expected to know everything. So even when people were teasing me, like I was trying to eat a pomegranate, I really had no idea what I was doing. I didn't understand it.
You know, you had to go for the seeds.
No, I didn't. I was trying to eat it like an apple
Mm-hmm.
because I don't know. Looks like a kind of funny apple, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when people tried to shame me, I just remember saying, you can't know everything.
Right.
So like really staying in that place of wonder and curiosity and not letting other people make you feel bad for what you know or don't know. That's what I learned a lot at Stanford, was holding my own integrity and sort of self-worth in the midst of a lot of not knowing. So that's what I learned.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think this actually, because this just caught my attention when you talked about kind of finding these mentors in different spaces. And I thought about this, you know, with the base program and how we have access to different, you know, faculty and staff who are intentionally here to, you know, care about us and make sure that we feel seen. We have somebody who's like a mentor, somebody who's looking out for us. So I was wondering, how did the whole Black Achievement, Success, and Engagement, how do you fit into its creation here at USF, so students do have that space to where, you know, if they are coming from different places who may not have as much exposure, they can, you know, feel at home and feel that they have that sense of community that you were speaking to. Where do you fit into the base equation?
So my, how can I put this? I have to go back and forth at the same time. One of the key things to my success at Stanford was I lived in the Ujamaa House, which is the Black Living Learning Community, or the Black Theme House.
Okay.
And so in that community, 50% of the students were Black identified. The other 50% in the whole dorm were not. So this is not a wing. This is the whole dorm where 50% of the students are Black, 50% were not. They could be whatever, right? That was fundamental to my success at that institution, right? So one of the things that taught me early on was how out-of-class spaces are just as integral to student success as in-class spaces, right? So when I got to USF, I started a living learning community called the Esther Madriz Diversity Scholars, which was really, there weren't enough Black folks at the time to have a Black-themed living learning community, right? First, you got to
Wait, what year was this?
That was, maybe 2006.
Ooh. Okay.
2005, 2006, we started the, I think so, around there, that we started the Esther Madriz, EMDS, okay? So I learned a lot in that community about what students needed across different racial and ethnic groups, how to provide community, how to create community, and how to really have high impact practices that supported student retention, right? So students put out their demands. Their first demand was for a living learning community. So I was immediately tapped as someone who could help support the development of a living learning community for Black identified students, because I had been working for 10 years with students of color around this work, right?
Right.
So my work was helping to develop the living learning community, but it was also the bigger picture, that was the student demand. But we did interviews, focus groups, surveys with students, faculty, and staff, Black students, faculty, and staff, to really understand what really are your needs. And what we realized is the LLC was just one part.
Right.
That students needed to feel and know that they belonged here, and that we would support Black students as scholars here, and that there was a space created for students to go to get support and access opportunities. And hence you get the BRC, the Black Scholars Program, and then Marsha Riley LLC to actually address all of those needs. So yeah, so that was my role. And then I was one of the co-leads who actually designed it, who helped conduct some of the focus groups, and then took all that information and began dreaming with Dr. Harrison, Dr. Balls Organista, Preston Walton, Julie Oreo. And it was really that team of 5, in addition to a broader group of people around us that we tapped and tagged into, right? But it was the 5 of us that kind of then started taking out the information, pushing it through, getting feedback, and then growing the program.
So I can imagine that, you know, it was probably like an influx of like just information, different experiences, you know, everybody's different. and all these different tidbits of information on this might help support this, might not help support. What would you say are some of the key things that you've learned over that I guess 10 plus year journey of just kind of extracting all this information from not only you doing like your actual like data collection and things like that, but just talking with us, and what are some of those key takeaways that you just seen as integral to having a sense of belonging and community?
I think one is really addressing imposter syndrome. There's so many young Black folks that are here. A lot of them are first generation college students. How did I get here? Nobody else in my family's here. What am I supposed to do here? Am I supposed to be here? What's it all about? So I think one is just letting every Black student know you belong here and you can succeed here, right? And so how do we make that just a given for our students that arrive, right? Obviously, people are going to struggle in a class here. People are going to have a roommate issue here. Right. People are going to have some feelings of homesickness. I should go home, right? That's normal. But to me, one of the biggest things was feelings that students had that they actively did not belong here because of things that were either being taught in the classes, things that professors would say, stuff that was jumping off in the dorms, and or their own sense and feelings of just bewilderment about being at this institution, right? So I think it's about addressing those issues about what happens in the classroom, what's in our curriculum, what's happening where students live. Can Black students live in a oppression-free life? I mean, okay, mostly. Right. You know what I'm saying? Mostly.
Trying to reduce as much of it
as we can, but nobody should be worried about people using the N-word in the dorm with them. Nobody should be worried about racist content in your classroom, right? And then so to me, it was this two-pronged approach of addressing the environment, but also supporting what students were also bringing in themselves around self-doubt. So I would say it's understanding those two and supporting and correcting, right? Supporting students and correcting the environment. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm wondering, so once we get the environment correct, we get the students feeling comfortable. And I know you've been away from the classroom, so it's been a minute since you've been able to, you've been able to pour into, others. But so once we are feeling comfortable in our environment, and once we are feeling like we belong here, when we're in the classroom, if we were being taught by Dr. Sears, what are some of the fundamental concepts and knowledge that you believe that every Black student should know? I'm thinking, just to go off on a quick little tangent, Dr. Sears, I don't think I've told you this, but you are responsible for the best educational experience I have had in my life.
What?
And it's a lot of factors to it because the living learning community is very unique. I don't think it's too many other spots in my life where I could have been in a group of 30 different Black people coming from different parts of the country where my education was literally tied up in their experiences as well. So I think that it's a different level of educational experience, but you were the facilitator of it. So I just want to say that you are responsible for one of, the best educational experiences I've received.
Thank you. I'm going to sit with that. I'm going to take that and hold that. Yeah, I think there's I'm a sociologist. So I think, number one, Black students need to understand their history. And the reason I say that is because you can't even understand sociology without understanding history, right? And I think a lot of times, I was guilty of this as a student. I see it repeated in generations of students. We think what we're experiencing is new, or we think it is exactly what happened in the past, right? And neither one of those is true, right? Like what happened in the past happened, but it's now adapting to the current context, right?
Right.
So we have to both understand what it meant in the past. We have to understand why people did it in the past, but we also have to understand what has shifted in the context. So that's giving it meaning now, right? So I think really understanding our history, understanding what our, foremothers and forefathers, people have done, I have my favorites. Diane Nash, like amazing. Ella Baker, always will be my hero, my shero, Fannie Lou Hamer, right? So
Sick and tired.
I
Sick and
know,
tired.
right? But like Fannie Lou, sharecropper, hardly any education, started the Mississippi Democratic Freedom Party, right? And went out in one of the most dangerous places for Black people, advocating for Black folks to have the right to vote, right? So I'm like, okay, if Fannie Lou can do it, well, surely I can go knock on some doors and get some people to vote, right? Surely I can motivate and mobilize my peers around getting out to do whatever we think is important. So I feel like we have these historical role models who've done with less, right? And have done amazing things. And they provide roadmaps for us when we think we're stuck. So I'm a stick, there's history. I also think we need to understand the impact of the racial wealth gap. That's a big one for me.
I remember second semester.
That's a big one for me because
the lecture.
It fundamentally shapes the discussions we're having now, right? We can't talk about housing if we don't understand redlining, if we don't understand Jim Crow, right? If we don't understand 40 acres and a mule. All of that stuff has set up to explain why we have why there's a higher percentage of Black folks in poverty than others. Because if you understand that history and that concept, you won't be blaming Black people for why they're poor.
Right.
You'll start to look at the structures. So I'm not going to lecture. I'm going to stop.
Right. But this is the space to lecture, though. I said Dr. Sears because, like, I don't know why it took me so long to click. Like, I got these professors with these wealths of knowledge, and I got the podcast mic. So, definitely feel free to drop as many gems as you want. But I'm just kind of thinking back to one of the things that really solidified, just how I even view myself was when you kind of were when you broke down race as just this social construct, and taking us back to like the colonial days in like Virginia, where they were still white indenture servants and they was getting back on the boats and going back to Europe, being like they doing all this to us, and then they went and got Black people who was visually distinct,
right?
A class that they could easily other, and just kind of create this hierarchy of a working class, a permanent working class, and just how that translated and spiraled into what we experience today. And that has done like just numbers on just like my psyche of just being a Black person, just like being able to unload all these projections of what Blackness means. I remember one of the first things we talked about in our big group discussions was what does Blackness mean to you? And to transition, I would ask you, Dr. Sears, how do you define Blackness and your relationship to it?
So first of all, I love being Black, right?
Me
and
too.
one of the
Me
things
too.
I had y'all read was loving Blackness, right? As political resistance, right? Because I think we're fundamentally taught not to love Blackness, right? And then I think another thing we read was Blackness is okay. I can't remember the exact, Imani Perry. Blackness is okay, racism is not, right? And so distinguishing between those two. So when I think of Blackness, I think of my family. I think about laughing hysterically with my family. I think about what it meant for me to go to Second Baptist Church. I think about what it meant for me to go to St. Rita's, which was an all-Black Catholic school, and how even that mass looked different than the other masses we would end up going to. I'd be like, oh, what's going on? These are different. I think about my kids, right? So when I think about Blackness, I think about just love. I think about smiling. I think about my rich culture, my rich past, my ancestral lineage of resistance and power, and magic, right? So, and when I think about magic, not like in the woo-woo way, though we got that too, but really in the capacity to make something out of nothing, right? So that's what I think of when I think of Blackness, right? That's just like, I think of racism and anti-Blackness. That's where you're going to get me thinking about the historical struggle of our people in this country, right? And oppression and all of those things that I think sometimes people lump with Blackness.
Yeah.
But I distinguish them between anti-Black racism. But for me, Blackness is love, joy, family. So that's it.
I'm so glad you made that distinction. I feel like that's one of those things that just, over time has just, molded together. I do think it's also a little bit harder to like take a positive, and to apply a positive connotation to blackness, especially because, we not literally black,
I know.
And it's this, you think about black magic and
Right.
all these other
Right.
negative connotations that they want to, push onto us,
That's right.
but we still have the ability to, look to the past, educate ourselves, and know that we are more than our experiences.
Yes.
We are not our experiences. They've strengthened us, they've made our rich culture, they've influenced us, but we are not. We are black beings,
Yes.
who are not tied to our past. So I
Right.
really do appreciate you for, spreading that, because that was one of those things that, especially as just like a young man, going into living on my own and living all this, miles away from my family, it really did a number for my confidence to just, just learn things like that from a scholarly perspective, to really sit down and study how things have changed over time to make you want to feel a certain way, but to be able to take that information and empower yourself to rise above it. So I really do appreciate that, Dr. Sears.
Can I add one quick thing?
Definitely.
When we, not on our trip, but I took a trip down for our, Southern immersion, our Black Heritage immersion trip with the group before I led you all.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the students said to me, I'm just black. And I said, ooh, I need you to remove that just, right? And I think that's what we're taught. We're taught that we are just black, right? Which is why I start the class with loving blackness.
Right.
Because I think if we as black folks, right, can interrupt that narrative of what blackness, what we've been taught blackness is, right? Black magic, black death, all the negativity that has been associated with who we are, and separate who we are from that narrative and story of who we are, that honestly, if I could just do that one thing, I'm going to walk away like, my job's done.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and I don't expect that I'm always going to be successful at that. But at the end of the day, if you ask me if there was only one thing you were teaching in Marshall Riley, it is that I hope that I am teaching young black people to understand the distinction between blackness and anti-black racism, and that you need to love that blackness. And that doesn't mean everything we are is all right and all good and we got, but that ultimately we are not just black.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
I always say, we got to go back to this framework of like people. We are people.
We are people.
People, not property.
Yes.
They tried to make us feel like we were.
Yes.
But we definitely,
We are
people, not
yes.
property. And yeah, so talking about that immersion trip experience though, what do you feel like was one, because I'm trying to think of this from like the facilitator perspective, and like you all like crafting the different like locations and all, and I also know that it was a project behind it. We had to do a whole project on their locations, and it was our final, so I know that it was a lot of work that went to the front of it. But I'm just thinking like, when you were thinking like of this trip, what were those things that were like, no, they need to stop here, or they need to see some things like that? What were you hoping to really extract from us on that trip, or expose us to?
So the Whitney Plantation, critical. To actually walk through that space, and what I love about the Whitney is how they have really focused on the black folks that were enslaved there, and lifted up those names and done the history to document and track who was there, right? Because that is about honoring the people.
Right.
We're not just statistics. These were people who had names, who had kids, who had lives. And I feel like they really do a great job of that, and being able to walk through that space and imagine families, kids. They have all the statues of the kids all over the place that lived here in this space and did this work under these conditions. So that place, yes. Equal Justice Institute. I mean, I'm trying to I have a group of friends. I'm like, I'll take y'all to the Equal Justice Institute, right? Because I think everybody in my life needs to go there, and walk through that space and cross over that Middle Passage Bridge. That took me a long time to listen to those what are they called? Holograms.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I think that place is phenomenal. I mean, as far as like impactful, learning, immersive,
Right.
right? And then probably the third place, and I know you asked for one, and I can't get one.
Yeah, no. Feel free to give way more.
Is Mississippi and going to the spaces where Emmett Till was, and kind of really hearing the story from people who are related to people. Again, it's just this immersion into this place, space, this land where this young man was just being and living, but is actually his life and his death became sort of a rallying cry, right, for our people to move. So I think those three spaces, I just don't think we can do without on that trip.
Yeah, definitely. Like that trip was, I wouldn't even say that transformative does it justice. Like even walking away from the Whitney plantation, I don't even use the word like slaves when referring to our ancestors anymore. It's always enslaved people because, like you said, it was like just a different level of humanization of the story. When you're actually able to physically be in a space, where people were sleeping, seeing like how far that they had to work to go from the quarters to how far that field was stretching. So just thinking about that, honestly, and even just thinking about the subtle things, like we've been free less years than we were enslaved. So just thinking about like how closely connected we are to this history. And I really think what you were saying earlier about how sociology is like that missing piece in history really is what can kind of unlock a lot of that missing piece for Black people. Because I feel like they really do like to reduce us down to dates, faceless figures, and really just moments in history when these are pretty, contemporaneous in this grand scheme of, human history, especially Black folks' history. So yeah, definitely the Emmett Till spots. I really did love all of Mississippi. That was my first time, so that was good to just like experience it all with y'all. In that museum, Dr. Sears, like emotional. So I would say that also did a huge number on just like experiencing on just like humanizing the experiences of our ancestors. So
and current day people, right?
To see the transition between
the
mass incarceration. So y'all really did y'all thing. Like I just really like to, as you were telling me how much, work you saw me put in with the podcast and how much thought, I really like to give people, that also like that same credit for, all the planning and the forethought that they put for different experiences that we've had. So I just want to say, thank you for putting all that effort and, those thoughts into those experiences for us. Cause I would say it's been it's been very critical to like, even the point where I started a podcast in my free time to start talking about stuff like this. So definitely did make, a lasting impact. So I want to let you know that hard work, it was not all for naught. So
thank you. Can I share my favorite memory?
I was just about to ask you. What was your favorite memory? So I want to know two things. So your favorite memory from our trip and then just your favorite memory from the school year.
Okay. So from the trip, my favorite memory.
I think I know what it is.
Okay.
Karaoke.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
on the bus.
Yeah, that was a fun night.
Yes.
That was a fun night.
And that everybody, Dr. Lawrence was up. I was singing and being silly. Like that to me just made me think family.
Yeah.
Right. And we actually, when my family gets together, the karaoke machine actually does come out. And not all of us can sing. But it doesn't matter. Right. And so that people were up there and acting it out. That will live with me forever and make me smile.
Yeah.
Forever and make me smile. And then the course of the year. Okay. I might have you to blame for this. I don't know. We'll have to see.
Uh-oh.
Y'all's final exam, second semester. Who convinced me?
Oh, that Socratic seminar?
To do the Socratic seminar.
I think it was me. I think I probably led that charge. Not
I was like, oh my God, I don't really know what I'm doing. But you know what? I'm asking students to learn. let me learn something new and different. So I'm online. What's this credit seminar? How do you set it up? How do you evaluate it? How can this be a final? So I'm like digging, right? But that day I was like, girl, this is SS. But would I do it again? Yes. And so from class, because that was probably one of my most uncomfortable moments, was like, this is people's final. I'm out here on a limb. I'm learning.
Right.
It's not tested well. And I could see other people's discomfort. Some people were super comfortable with it. But I was like, okay, I see the potential and possibility. So as uncomfortable as I was, it will stay in my mind. But I'm going to thank you because I would actually start integrating Socratic seminar earlier without grades into the class.
Right.
To get people practicing. I really loved what I heard in the conversations, how it made people prepare to come to the conversations. And so I know that's something I was like,
to go back, the logic was just that, in class all year, we have been going to class and having these really good conversations.
I know.
Like where we were and they were based off like the reading that we did. So we already had some type of like text to like refer to. I was like, we literally are in Socratic seminars already, and I was so shocked to learn that like you just never did one, because I'm thinking, Dr. Sears, one of my favorite professors, like of course what it's, because I've been doing them since high school, so it's just like, yeah, but I didn't know that, gave you that level of stress, but
it was fine. I mean, I don't mind. It was just like, oh, okay, let me try it, right? And so I always also want to model that I'm always learning, and I'm open to learning. I think that's important. If you're asking people to go with you on a learning journey, you as a faculty member also need to be open to growing, learning, being uncomfortable in that, making mistakes, right? And getting feedback on it, right? Otherwise, to me, that co-learning is critical to my understanding of who I am as a professor, right? So I'm going to take that risk, right? But it was definitely like trying to figure out how to evaluate it. Then we had people who didn't want to talk, and I was like, oh man, now what do we do? So anyway, so I think my learning as a professor grew a lot in that moment, which is why it stands out, right? Another piece I'll share is, I don't know if you know this, but I wrote an article based on y'all's discussion post. And so just reading you all's discussion post on homegoing was so powerful to me that's why I wanted to write about it and share that I think if anybody teaching in an all-Black space with students who have that many Black identities should teach homegoing, because I think it helps, the controversial term ADOS, right? African descendants of slaves, right? But it helps those Black folks who are rooted in the U.S. understand what happened to Black Africans, and it helps those students who are African Americans by a generation being removed from Africa understand really the Black, deep experience in the United States, because I find those groups often miss each other, right? So anyway, those are the things I remember most: the fun, the karaoke, that Socratic seminar exam, and then you all's discussions of homegoing were really powerful and impacted me.
Well, no, I'm so glad that we were able to, give you some value in exchange.
Hello, always.
I'm so glad. And thinking back to like what you said with like the karaoke, I instantly think of like, family too, because the LLC really is like my family out here. Like I was just telling you before we started recording, we were doing like the big birthday celebration for like all our friends from the LLC. So I was like, we're still close. We still all love each other. They probably gonna watch this video. I'm gonna send it to the group chat. So, they love to hear you talk, Dr. Sears. So they would all be tuning in. So definitely grateful that you were the connector piece and all that, as well as the facilitator. So I want to say thank you.
Yeah. And thank you, Justin. I'm not gonna say what I'm gonna say since you're gonna put this in the group chat.
You can tell me later.
I'll tell you later. But It was an honor and a privilege to lead you all in that and to be the facilitator, leader of Marsha Riley that year. It was so personally, professionally, spiritually fulfilling for me. I mean, I don't know if students realize what it means for a Black faculty member to walk into a class and see all Black faces, right? Because that's not my experience in most of my classrooms.
Right.
And so to be able to, it also is incredibly powerful for the faculty, which is why we try to invite faculty from across the university in.
That was also a big part of it.
Right.
Like, I feel like that was very smart in just like connecting the Black community. 'Cause now when I'm walking, you know, we would have like guest lecturers who would, you know, be led by other professors in different departments who can also get us thinking about, you know, Blackness beyond. I remember when it clicked to me, I was like, oh wait, Dr. Sears is teaching our you know, classes from the perspective of a sociologist.
That's right.
And then it really clicked when, you know, we had like a historian come in, and then like a professor from the School of Education come in, and a politician, and then just seeing how like each one of you all like interacted with like Blackness, but in your own different you know, educational spaces and your discipline. So I thought that was also very cool and a nice little touch as well. So
So I love that, and they love it. They walk in and they go, and you can see people kind of go, "Oh, I'm here. Oh, I see these students in the room, and they see me," and you can see people's shoulders kind of, because we're also in a performative space when we show up in other spaces, right? And we're, whether we want to or not, we're representing. Just like students go into classrooms and they feel like, you know, I'm bringing the Black world with me, but I'm not. I can't speak for all Black people, but y'all still looking at me like I am, right? Well, that happens to us in just on a different platform.
Right.
And so to be able to know you can walk in a space and you're not having to speak for anybody, but really yourself in that moment, and you can have nuance, and people may or may not, but most likely won't.
They're gonna get the reference.
Right, they're gonna get it, right? So it's just super powerful space for everybody. So yeah,
I'm glad to, you know, have shared that space. So
me too.
I want to start breaking it down. I know you got somewhere to be. Just one more question that I didn't get to. I know you kind of touched on it, but one of the things that I really do value from your class was just the intentional effort to talk about the role of women in our community. And I know, even, you know, going back to earlier, you're talking about your grandmother. I know there are a bunch of Black women who are so instrumental in my life. My mom, my grandma, my TT, all them. So really just wanted to let you give, you know, some more, just give you some more space to talk more so about the role of Black women in our community historically, because I know that was something that you were very adamant on teaching us, because throughout all the years of Black history that we may have gotten, you know, Black women's role might have been like this much. So just wanted to also give you the space to speak on that as well before we got up out of here.
Yeah, thank you. You know, so one of my favorites I mentioned was Ella Baker. And Ella Baker was really about group-centered leadership, right? And her whole thing was that strong people don't need strong leaders. And one of the things when we look at Black history, we see these Black men sort of like the peopling of our history, right? And so you have this male figure that sort of is put forth as the leader, right? And so part of that has to do with how larger society shapes and dictates who they will listen to. So that's number one. But number two, it also has to do with how Black women tend to lead. And that doesn't mean we don't step up and assume leadership roles. We do, and we have, right? But I think there's also a different model of leadership, which is group-centered leadership, right? Which is Black women tend to work together, right, to create strong people who then, as groups and as individuals, go out and change things, right? And my favorite example is the Montgomery bus boycott. That was Black women. That was your Black women's church auxiliary, okay? That people think just organize who's going to usher, right? But that system, that network, right, of Black women having the phone tree, right? That is what allowed the Montgomery bus boycott to be successful.
Right. So everybody can, you know, get their carpools together so the kids can get to school and, you know, dad can get to work and all that.
That's right. And that's how King got lifted
Found
up.
out about it, yeah.
Right?
He came in.
But he just slid kind of on top of this network of Black women that were already in effect, and that really they were the success. And if we look at most Black, no, I'm going to say it this way. If we look at all Black movements that have been successful in this country, we have to look at the role of Black women.
Definitely.
Because they are the ones that are doing the day-to-day organizing, the day-to-day relationship building, the day-to-day movement of people, either to the ballot, into the carpool, out to do the picket, replacing and caring for people who may have been jailed, right? And making sure their families and other responsibilities are cared for. That's all been Black women. And that is what has sustained us and moved us. So that's why, to me, I really want to make sure, I also brought up Bayard Rustin, right? We like to kind of hide people who are LGBTQ in our community. We like to try to, I don't want to say minimize the role of Black women, but we don't lift it up with the same intensity.
In the mythology of, of a
right.
Malcolm or a King.
Right, exactly. So I just feel like that's really important for us, because if we don't understand those critical roles, then we will overlook them, we won't sustain them, and we won't lift them up, which then keeps them going. Right.
Also miss a lot of, little gems that can keep us going,
right.
and we can use to adjust our plans moving forward. Because
that
group-centered leadership, I definitely do remember the lecture on that one. It's all coming back. So
right. I know. So yeah.
But yeah, so Dr. Sears, we are officially at the end of the questions. Before we break down, I do offer you the space to say any, last remarks. But that's pretty much all I have from you, Dr. Sears. I just want to say thank you for coming on the episode.
Thank you so much, Justin. I have no last things to say except thank you. Thank you for doing this work. Thank you for the work that I've seen you do in the community, right? Also with Brother Connection.
Thank you.
And all the other spaces that you move in. You are a light. And you really have taken everything that you've been given here and before, and you aren't just holding it for yourself, right? And so you're putting it out there into the community, and you're lifting others alongside you. And so there's nothing more I think we could ask for. And so thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Sears, thank you. Well, with that being said, that was another episode of Truth to Power. Thanks for watching.